We are back on Inside Politics. Our guest today, Chip Saltzman, former Tennessee Republican Party chair and GOP consultant. Chip, the last debates coming here in Nashville to Belmont, is that going to be perhaps the last best chance for both of these candidates to do something that'll make the difference come November?
Yeah, it usually is. I think one of the things that we can probably predict is that debates will be the most watched debates that we've probably ever seen. Every debate's going to matter, and there's a lot of people saying, "Oh, that Joe Biden's going to do terrible and the president's going to do great, or vice versa." So usually debates, there's something about them that we don't expect, and it kind of changes the focus of any kind of a race. Now, the difference is, can they take advantage of it? That's what we'll have to see in the next 60 days.
We haven't seen the polls coming out of the Republican convention yet, but right now, looking at the Real Clear Politics and at 538, it appears that Joe Biden's got about a 7-point lead nationally, maybe 8 points. He's ahead in all the battleground states except for North Carolina, where they're tied. What does the president got to do, and how quickly has he got to do it to pull this back up? Does he have to be even by Labor Day?
No, I don't think it has to be even. I think he's got to be within a couple of points, maybe 3 or 4 points, because what we saw from 16, where Hillary was, I think the national average had her 4 or 5 points. I do think there is this silent majority that doesn't answer polls. It's harder to poll these days. And I've seen polls that show him tied in Minnesota. I've seen him in polls that's within the margin of Wisconsin. And most of those battleground states, except maybe for Pennsylvania and Michigan, he's inside the margin. If we're inside the margin right now, I feel good about those states.
There weren't very many Tennesseans in the spotlight for either one of these debates, one of these conventions. Marsha Blackburn did speak to the Republican convention on Wednesday night. She was on the night of future stars for the party. Does that mean, in terms of this particular race, she might be somebody that's frequently on as a surrogate for the president on cable TV more, or maybe even doing some campaigning virtually in some other battleground states?
I'm not sure it's possible for Marsha to be on cable TV more, but if she could, she would. She's a great great spokesman for the party. Certainly, she will be out and about in those battleground states that matter. She's a great communicator. I think you'll see her out a lot, and I suspect you'll see Governor Lee out to some states as well. So there's a lot of folks in Tennessee that are involved at all the different levels of the campaigns. I would expect to see a lot of them over the next 60 days, not in Tennessee.
If the president wins, it would appear Mike Pence will be the next Republican nominee for president come 2024, but the president talks about his son and others possibly. Is it going to be a real battle for it in 2024? And if the president loses, are you going to have a complete fruit basket turnover in the Republican Party?
So it's what we've seen now is they're all going to have big primaries. I mean, I think Democrats had 20-something. We had in 2016, there were 17. There's going to be a lot of people running for president. Look, I'm a big fan of the vice president. I think Mike Pence would be a great, not only nominee, but I think he'd be a great president. But look, it'd probably be easier right now, Pat, if you and I talk about who wasn't running for president than who might.
Here in Tennessee, it appears this state's going to be a pretty solid Trump state, as it was 4 years ago. We do have a U.S. Senate seat being filled. Lamar Alexander is retiring, and former ECD commissioner and ambassador to Japan Bill Hagerty is the Republican nominee. He's up against a political unknown. The Democratic nominee is a Memphis environmental activist, Marquita Bradshaw. Will that race be a solid GOP hold as they try to keep hold of the Senate, or is he got to get out and campaign to make sure something happens?
Oh, I think he'll get out and campaign, but I think it's going to be a solid GOP seat. I won't sell out my friend, but I was talking to a Democrat consultant in Washington. They did not know the name of the Democrat senator nominee in Tennessee, so I thought that was a good sign.
Will the presidential race be anything ultimately but a referendum on President Trump and how he's been handling both the pandemic and the economy?
No, I think it's going to be, obviously the president's reelect is usually about the president, but I think with this year, with COVID, you're going to see it talk about that. You're going to talk about the economy. But I think law and order is going to be a big part of this issue. I think the big cities that are rioting and they're burning, and that is going to be a huge issue with suburban voters, especially women, as they kind of talk about the law and order piece of this. And you heard a lot about it last night, about the big cities that are burning. That's going to be a big issue going into November, I think.
How do you talk about that issue? Richard Nixon talked about it a lot in 1968, but how do you talk about that issue and not make it racial and then therefore make things worse?
Well, I think you talk about you can take it head on. I think what the folks did, and like Speaker Sexton did right here in Tennessee, he made peaceful protesting great. We love peaceful protesting, but if you burn the courthouse, you're going to go to jail. It's now a felony. If you assault a police officer, you're going to go to jail. It's now a felony. If you deface public property, you're going to jail because that is now a felony. If you want a peaceful protest, absolutely. If you want to walk down the street and talk about your issue, I think every Republican and Democrat supports that. But what we saw last night after the president's speech, where people were assaulting people coming out of the White House, where they were yelling and screaming, Senator Paul had to have 3 or 4 cops surrounding him just to get to his hotel. That's not okay. And when you see that on television, and when you see that on social media, that is not okay. And most of the people, they believe in law and order. And most of the people believe in protest, but they don't believe in burning buildings and breaking windows and stealing Louis Vuitton purses. That's not peaceful protesting.
But the event last night, the event Thursday night with the president, he talked about you want to use science and data in order to do things to combat the virus. But there was almost nobody in that crowd wearing masks, and there was no social distancing. Is that not a situation of don't pay attention to what I say? Aren't the voters paying more attention to what they do?
My assumption is most of those folks had a test before they went in.
I was told only those close to the president got tested, so a lot of people in that audience did not get tested.
Well, when I go to the White House, which I did 2 weeks ago, I was tested before I walked into a meeting with the vice president. I know that I was tested when I went in there.
Chip Saltzman, thank you so much for being with us, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you along this campaign trail between now and November.
Good. Thanks, Pat.
And thank you for joining us on Inside Politics. Hope you'll be back here again for a future show. If you can't get enough politics in the meantime, go to the News Channel 5 website. You'll find my Capitol View commentary there. There's a new commentary posted every Friday afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you back here next time. Goodbye.